Well, good morning. What a beautiful Sunday. And it's very possible we could have a temperature under 90 degrees for the first time in a long time. Welcome to the home of Unitarian Universalism in Central Washington. I am Steve Clem, and our speaker today is Reverend Thomas Perchlik. The sermon today is Always Going Home. If you are a visitor this morning, we are so glad you are here. We welcome every person of goodwill just as you are, whomever you love, whatever body you inhabit, whatever your age, you are welcome here. And we invite everyone to join us after this service for our social hour here in the sanctuary or in the Zoom room. And now, could we all turn to the camera and wave hello to our friends on Zoom? And for those folks on Zoom, you will find the order of service in the chat. And if you have any questions, please ask Julie McAllister, who is your Zoom host today. Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take 3 minutes to greet those around you and ask each other this question. What does home mean to you? All right? Ready, set, go. It is so good to be together this morning in all the ways that we gather. So, I have a few announcements. And the first one is that Reverend Thomas is still needing people who are willing to help find and or provide childcare. All right, so that's very important. And we have people that are waving their hands. Good. Okay. Right, not for him. It is not for Reverend Thomas, and I'm sure that Amy would be quite surprised. Also, I want to remind you that our water ceremony is on September 8th. So generally, if you aren't familiar with the water service, we gather together with little things of water that have meaning to us from the prior 12 months. And we all combine our water together. And then we go water our tree that's behind the blue house. So if you would like to contribute, make sure and gather some water. That's true. Thank you, Diane. We gather on the homeland of the Pasquosa, where they live for generations upon generations as stewards of this land, and they still live here, practicing tribal traditions at all levels of culture through mutually held customs and beliefs of tribal philosophy, folklore, religious activity, and political structure. The Pasquosa and the other tribes and bands of the Colville Confederated Tribes continually work to retain the knowledge necessary for their traditional life and to maintain a close attachment and interrelationship with their ancestral lands and the earth. The same songs sung by their ancestors in mat lodges on the banks of our rivers and lakes are still sung at winter dances and during stick games today. Songs and prayers accompany the feasts for first roots, first salmon, and first berry each year. Their children are still taught stories about coyote, kingfisher, and mole. Hunting and fishing and gathering practices are passed on to generations, digging camas and bitter roots in the spring, hunting for deer and gathering huckleberries in the mountains in the late summer, and the annual cleaning and decoration of the graves of their ancestors. Here at CUUF, we support Indigenous people in many ways. If you go to our welcome page on the CUUF website, you will find links to information about Indigenous rights and reparations and to Indigenous advocacy groups. Now,
be seated. I am calling you to worship in the name of life and love combined. Breathe. Breathe and be in this space, in this time with these people and worship. Consider what is of worth, all that you value, all that you cherish, all that you love. Share what is of worth, and then share it in word and song and action. Give shape to what is most important, most worthy, most due of reverence, whether it is sagebrush or a newborn baby, a work of art or the results of hard science. We are here today to claim, to share, and to shape what is of greatest worth, and to find home in the midst of it.
A flame within a chalice is the primary symbol of the Unitarian Universalist faith tradition. The lighting of a chalice symbolizes our gathering to affirm our values and faith. If you are joining by video, please light your own chalice as we kindle the sacred flame and speak these words, which are on our screens and in your order of service. In this small flame dwells the beacon light of lanterns guiding travelers home, the warmth of hearth fires tended through the generations, the transforming energy of furnaces and the power and life of our sun. May these blessings, warm and light and life-giving energy, be kindled in each of us.
Further open the theme of the day, we have readings, wisdom readings. Children don't need to stay for this because they're kind of adult grown-up words, but if you, so what I'd first like people to do is create an arch in the middle here. And for those children who would like to go to their classrooms, you come up to the front and then go through the arch. So those who want to go off and play with those who have agreed to play with you. Each other to find meaning in the spirit of love that we share. Now go to each other to find meaning in the spirit of love that we share. Focus on the image of home. I have two readings. The first one is from the Christian Apostle Paul. It's his second letter to the Christians in Corinth. Words that Unitarian Universalists don't usually like. Therefore, we are always confident and know that as long as we are at home in the body, we are away from the Lord. For we live by faith, not by sight. We are confident, I say, and would rather prefer to be away from the body and at home with the Lord. So we make it our goal to please him, whether we are at home in the body or away from it. This is because we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each of us may receive what is due for the things done while in the body, whether good or bad. And then the second reading is not of home being far away, but here. It is not by, and it's by a religious education director from Milwaukee. It is not by chance that you have arrived here today. You have been looking for something larger than yourself. Inside of you, there is a yearning, a calling, a hope for more, a desire for a place of belonging and caring. Through your struggles, someone nurtured you into being, instilling a belief in shared purpose and common yet precious resource of love that belongs to all of us. And so you began seeking a beloved community, a people that does not put fences around love, a community that holds its arm open to possibilities of love, a heart home to nurture your soul and to share your gifts. Welcome. Welcome to this place of belonging and caring. Welcome home. When we create the feeling of home is that we set aside with the time, with reverence and honor to remember places and events that mark us in a deep and personal way. This is not a time for politics or advertisements. It's a time for care, intention. It's a way of saying that we embody the caring ministry of our congregation. Throughout the month, the pastoral care team works to encourage and coordinate how we care for one another. Today, Gary Pape is the pastoral care representative on duty. If you need to speak with someone about personal needs or troubles, or just want a nice person to talk to, Gary's here. In this time, we share something of significance in our lives. Each of us has the responsibility to share only what we've been given permission to share, to support each other in the way we listen, and to keep our remarks short. This is a door we open to further connection. So I'll take a flame down here, and you'll be welcome to come forward to take the microphone. Say your sitting in silence feels like home to me. I've been doing it with other people and by myself for many years, since 1997. And it feels familiar, it feels grounding, always connects me to the place where I am. And I like the way in which the crystal bowl led us into that silence. Home, I will say, is not a place you are from. Home is the place where you are going. In a sense, we have always been going home. And I've always been there. In the best spiritual traditions, deepest heart of every religion, home is always here and now. But we lose a sense of being home. We lose it easily. During this past month when I was away from this valley and you all, to be honest, I was quite happy. I focused on that little baby in the world, and babies are magic. My newest granddaughter, I focused on my other granddaughters, just full of life and energy. I had several days where Amy and I just focused on our marriage and our togetherness. But somewhere in the middle of all that, I started to feel a little unmoored. I was a perpetual guest in someone else's house. My daughter's homes and Airbnbs. And then I began to think about my Wenatchee house, the place I call home. And I began to wonder about you all. It's rather cool when you're on an island by the ocean. And I kept looking at the weather reports and thinking about you, and then hearing about how the air conditioning in this building had failed. And I worried about you. And I wanted to know what was going on. I started to wonder. So where is my home exactly? It led to this sermon. You may know the saying, your home is where your heart is. The home is where the heart is. Decades ago, moving from place to place with my wife, I claimed my own version of the saying, which was, home is where the Amy is. I still like that saying. But a few weeks back, she decided to stay in the Woodinville area for a few weeks to care for our youngest child. My youngest daughter and son-in-law are trying to go back to work, and they're struggling to find childcare, and it wasn't working out too well. And so there's this weird feeling where I'm in the house with all the things that mark my relationship and life with Amy, and yet she's not there. That question, where is my home? And many people have faced a house that suddenly someone is not in anymore. Parents or a partner, members of the family, and suddenly your own sense not only of home, but of who you are, yourself and the world is shifted. As a theologian, I am asked to wonder, what is home? What does it meant? What does it mean when different religious traditions raise up the image, the idea of home? Of course, the dictionary defines home as a place where you live. It's just where you live. But also it's a place of stability and safety and familiarity and comfort. Home is a sense of belonging, of shared experience, of safety and of love. And it can be found in the place where we live, but it's more than that. So people and conditions are part of home, of being home. And even someone who has experienced a house of anxiety and abuse, or seen their home destroyed by nature or destroyed by other people, will still say, I want to go home, and know that they are speaking of a real place and something more than that. People can experience home, even if it's been lost or taken from you. Remember when my mother first suffered her first stroke. She had 2 strokes. The first one she recovered from really well. But I went back to Greeley, Colorado, my brothers and sisters, and to kind of be with her for a little while and watch over her. And she was in a rehab center. So I went to live in the house, the same house I had lived for the first 20 years of my life. 20 years. And my school, where I went from kindergarten through 12th grade, was only 3 blocks away from that house. And the college where I started was only 4 blocks away from the house, the college where my father, the university where my father worked. But all the people were gone. And everything had changed. And I wasn't sure what was going to happen to my mother exactly. And that big house, a 2-story brick house, huge old house, didn't feel like home anymore. It was my childhood home, and yet it wasn't home. Luckily, my mom had been out in front, in the front garden when she collapsed. So it was the neighbor from across the street. And the neighbor came over and we shared some memories. And yet it was this odd feeling of that building no longer being, it was just a house. It had familiar decor, but everything had changed. And I walked the streets of my childhood home, but it was no longer home. The phrase, "you can't go home again," is echoed in that experience, going back. It was popularized by a novel by Thomas Wolfe. Thomas, no relation to me. That book was published after his death in 1940, as America was drifting into a world war. It was edited from unfinished manuscript. In it, a young writer publishes a wildly popular book about his childhood home. The novel tells the story of George Webber that makes references to his Libya Hill. The book is a national success, but when the residents of the town read the book, they're very unhappy. He tries to go home. He tries to go back to the village because he's gotten so much approval and so much success by talking about this, his beloved childhood home, and he goes back and everybody hates him. There's almost death threats that come out from the town that he thought was his home. Young George Webber gets on a train and starts traveling. He's lost his home and he's trying to find it again. The author, Wolfe notes, young George Webber was never so assured of his purpose as when he was going somewhere on a train, and he never had the sense of home so much as when he felt he was going there. It was only when he got there that his homelessness began. Eventually, George ends up in Germany under the shadow of the Nazi Reich. And at one point he talks about hearing the people, talking to the people there. and he hears the tales of woe and fear and unspeakable works gushing forth and beating upon my ears, he said. They told me stories of their friends and relatives who had said unguarded things in public and disappeared without a trace. Stories of how the Gestapo turned neighbors' quarrels and petty personal spites into political persecution. Stories of concentration camps and pogroms, of home utterly destroyed. War and cruelty are taking people from their homes, even hoy en mismo, even today. Any sense of home. Gaza, Ukraine, Syria, Myanmar, Haiti, violence, anger, forcing people from their homes. And there's this vast migration moving, people moving, spurred by social and economic and natural disasters, and all of that taking away a sense of safety and security, a place where you belong. Instead, a longing rising up to find a place where you can connect. I talked this morning about the Pescosa, and we're trying to end the war against the Native Americans, which destroyed utterly any sense of home, and yet constantly they're seeking it, reweaving it, trying to make home again. So the first thing you have to realize is you can't go back. You can't go back to the home that you've lost. You can't really ever go back because everything's always changing and it never really existed. George Weber says you can't go back home to your family, back home to your childhood, back home to a romantic love, to the escapes of time and memory, to a young man's dreams of glory and fame, to exile, to escape. He goes on and on and on in this paragraph, and then he finally says, back home to the old forms and systems of things which once seemed everlasting, but which are changing all the time. To realize that everything is changing all the time, and to be open to that. To say it's not taking home away from you and shoving it into the past, that home is still present and includes change, is the first step towards finding home again, to go home. The Buddha said, all things are subject to change and ending, even the things you love, even the things you know well. Accept the shifting, accept the change. And then the second thing is to find what is of home in the place where you are, in the time, with the people you have beside you. This is key. It's key to understanding Paul's letter to the Corinthians. Have you heard that at this little turn at the end where he talks about being at home in the body again? First he was saying, we don't want to be in our bodies. We want to go to heaven. That's the real home. And then at the end he says something about being at home in the bodies by doing good in the world, by pleasing, he's trying to please the Lord by being present here as an emblem of love and kindness. This is always how the Unitarians understood this passage. They didn't focus on that, well, let's get out here. Always Unitarians from the very earliest days and Universalists focused on how do we make the kingdom here and now? How do we live in love here and now? To be home is to treat others with the spirit of love and goodness and make it active, make it present. With love, heaven is a place on earth, like the song said. Returning to the U.S., to New York City, George Weber in the book, Can't Go Home Again, talks about the simple joy he felt at being once more a part of familiar things that also contained an element of strangeness and unreality. And with a sharp stab of wonder, he reminded himself that he had really come home again as he had over and over before. So once you find change and strange, then find the objects and things around you that ground you in the place and the people you are with. There's a woman I knew. I noticed she had a little statue of Ganesha on the dashboard of her car, like some people have St. Christopher. And at that point, I'd been studying Ganesh, and I knew a lot about Ganesh, and I really thought he was a kind of, when I first went into Hinduism, I was really much more in the esoteric, vision of this ultimate reality that transcended all limitations. But as I started to study Hindu culture and I started to know Hindus, I started to like the little deities, all the different deities, and the way and what they embodied and what they said. And Ganesh is just happy. He's fun. He's got this big bellied child body and huge elephant ears, and he's just charming. But he's also the guardian of beginnings. He's the Lord of beginnings. Whenever you start something, you have to mark Ganesh, because he tells you, there will be dangers, there will be difficulties, and I'll be with you. It's got that sense of I'll be with you. So she had left India with a professional degree to come to America. She left from India and went to Indiana. And she had brought that little statue of Ganesh with her in her suitcase. It was given to her by her grandmother. So it was a grounding. It was a reminder of who she was, and she continued to do puja to Ganesh whenever anything started, whenever anything began, every morning. She eventually got a nicer one in a shrine in her house, but she put Ganesh on the dashboard of her car to remind her that all her paths, all her ways, Ganesh was still there. The faith of her childhood, the religion of her childhood was still present in some way or another. Her grandmother, her mother, still there and present. And she made of Muncie, Indiana, her home. She found ways to connect to the people there and love the people there and be valued there. And yet always home came with her. It was her attitude, it was her orientation. The parallel to heaven in Buddhism, so now I'm switching from Hinduism to Buddhism. The parallel to heaven in Buddhism is the Pure Land. The idea is that it's too difficult with all the demands and threats and distractions that we have on this life to ever really meditate well and to become enlightened. So the idea is that you will, if you practice some constant rituals that ground you, then eventually you will be reincarnated in the Pure Land. It's a form of Buddhism, Pure Land of Buddhism, where you can improve your concentration and seek clarity. My primary teacher is Thich Nhat Hanh, teacher of Buddhism. And he once wrote in his book, it's a little thin book called Walking Meditation, I am told that the Pure Land has 7 gem trees. That it has roads paved with gold. I love pebbles and leaves covering the ground. I love bushes. My favorite paths are those with dirt roads and meadows on both sides, streams and bamboo fences. As a young boy, I told my master, if the Pure Land doesn't have lemon trees, then I don't want to go. Later, when I realized that both the world and the Pure Land come from the mind, I was very happy. I was happy knowing that I could walk in joy here or there, that lemon trees and starfruit trees exist also in the Pure Land, which is here and now. I am sure I would not offend Buddha or God by telling you a secret. If you could take peaceful, anxiety-free steps while walking here on earth, there would be no need for you to go to the Pure Land or the heavenly kingdom of God. You'd already be there. When you are peaceful, joyful, and free, suffering is transformed into the Pure Land, and you don't need to go anywhere. To learn about the earth is to come home again. Remember when I decided to become a UU minister was when I moved with my wife down to Phoenix, Arizona. Weird place. There were palm trees, That's just a place you go for vacation. You can't live there, right? It was nothing like Colorado. The mountains were different. The insects were different. These giant stick bugs, like this huge insects. It was all different. Cool was when it got down to 90 degrees, right? I was stuck. Colorado, it gets cold every day. But when I walked into the Unitarian Universalist Church there, First Unitarian Church, I felt at home. Immediately felt at home, comfortable, familiar, included, welcomed. I found then through those people a way to understand the desert of Arizona, to connect with it, to start to make it feel a little bit like home because it was already their home and we were together. I think of the people, the Pescosa, we mention every week, who are trying to make of this land and the reservation that has been formed up to the north home again, to find their way through relationships, through ritual, here and now, despite all the depredations of the Great War of 200 years in this country. And we are all, hopefully, waking up. Most of us, I don't know, some of us, most of us know that there is a vast problem with the climate, that the whole climate of the earth is changing because we, as human beings, thought we were so arrogant that we could control the entire universe and we could control the earth and we would make it perfect. And we're starting to realize that things like killing all those irritating beavers was destroying the very earth we loved. And to reconnect with them and to see them as our allies and our friends and our neighbors is a transformation where the earth stops being out there and the city's over here, and we begin to realize we're always on the earth. We're always in nature. We're always home if we wake up to it. There's some parts of the earth we can make more comfortable than other parts, but we can do it in a way that does not undermine the very integrity of the house in which we dwell. I was just reading this last week about in Britain and Ireland, there was an egret, great white egret, which used to rise in clouds from those islands. And then they were gone. They were utterly destroyed, but they lived elsewhere in the world. And the Brits decided to bring them back. In 2010, they started to recolonize white egrets. And the egrets said, we're home. They loved the place. They're growing and repopulating and increasing in numbers, and the people are saying to them, welcome home. Fitting in is becoming who you think you need to be in order to be accepted. Brene Brown wrote. But belonging is being your authentic self and knowing that no matter what happens, you belong. So let us let go of the past. Let's not strive for some magic future world. Let's be present with each other on this good earth, and may it be our home. I'm glad to be here at home with you. And to make of this congregation a spiritual home, a religious home, a place of safety and security and confidence and belonging, we take an offering every week. And this week, the offering is for the well-being of this congregation and for the furthering of its ministries.
We are blessed by your generosity. May these gifts make a difference in our communities through the ministries of this church.
We who are religious seekers and wanderers, let us always be going home. The more we open our hearts to love and wonder and beauty, the more we seek and see and touch the connections we have with all living things and good, kind human beings, we shall not only be going home, but be home on this good earth. So may it be.
And now, as we extinguish our chalice, please join with me in saying a slight variation of our traditional words. And the words are on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and embody in our living until we are together again. Our tradition is to join hands and make a circle as we sing our closing song. And so please join the circle. And if this is not comfortable for you, we respect your boundaries and simply put your hands on your heart and connect with us in that way. Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again. Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again. And stay for fellowship and